All right, let's talk about nondisjunction. So, nondisjunction is a mistake that can happen during meiosis that can cause the gametes, the sex cells, sperm and egg cells, to either have extra chromosomes or missing chromosomes. So, during the process of meiosis, we have two different phases where either homologous chromosome pairs or sister chromatids are supposed to separate from each other. And so that happens during anaphase. So, anaphase 1 or anaphase 2. But what you can have happen is you can have those chromosomes not separate like they're supposed to. So this is an example where we have a non-disjunction event happening in anaphase 1 of meiosis 1. Non-disjunction, if you just break down that word, it simply means not coming apart. So a junction means being together. Disjunction would be separating. And so non-disjunction would be not separating and staying together. And that's exactly what's happening here with these two chromosomes, right? They're not separating, they're supposed to, right? The homologous chromosomes are supposed to go to opposite ends of the cell during anaphase 1, but that's not what's happening. And so these three replicated chromosomes will go into a cell that will then go through meiosis 2, and this one will go into a cell that goes through meiosis 2. And then when those sister chromatids separate in meiosis 2 like they're supposed to, you wind up with cells that either have an extra chromosome, or N plus 1, or cells that have N minus 1. They're missing a chromosome. Likewise, similar process can happen during anaphase 2 of meiosis 2. So you could have anaphase take place normally, everything goes well like it's supposed to in meiosis 1, but then in meiosis 2 you could have one of those cells have a chromosome that fails to separate, and so those sister chromatids don't separate like they're supposed to. And once again, you can have extra or missing chromosomes. Now here, if it happens during anaphase 2, then this cell, right, the gametes that are produced by this cell, they'll have the normal number, right, because everything went well, everything went just fine in that one's meiosis, but in this one, you get the extra or missing. And what this causes is our sex cells to either have missing or extra chromosomes. And if those sex cells undergo fertilization, right, if like an egg cell with an extra chromosome or a missing chromosome is fertilized by a sperm cell, or a sperm cell with an extra missing chromosome fertilizes an egg cell, then you can wind up with the zygote, right, that initial cell that we all start our lives as, having extra missing chromosomes. And what that means is that every cell that descends from that, as that individual grows and develops, is going to have an extra or missing chromosome in their cells. And these can cause disorders that we call chromosomal disorders. So if you have 2 copies of an autosome fail to separate during meiosis, an individual may be born with 3 copies of that chromosome. This is known as a trisomy. And there are 3 known syndromes that result from this. Those are trisomy 13, which is called Patau syndrome, trisomy 18, or Edwards syndrome, and trisomy 21, which is Down syndrome, which you've probably heard of Down syndrome before. The reason why you've heard of Down syndrome and might not have heard of these other ones is that individuals born with trisomy 13 or 18 tend to not live for very long. Most Patau syndromes end with a miscarriage or a stillbirth, but some do survive for a while. It's not a good life for the individuals who do actually make full term here. Similar with Edwards syndrome, they tend to live maybe a little bit longer than those with Patau syndrome. But individuals with Down syndrome can live to be 40, 50 years old. Now, they tend to not have as long of a life still. But people with Down syndrome can function in society. Of course, they have their challenges, and those challenges can be more or less severe depending on the individual. But that's why you probably know somebody with Down syndrome, whereas you might not know anybody with any of these other ones. Now, you might be wondering, what about other trisomies? What about trisomy 2, trisomy 4? Well, other trisomies, most trisomies, are going to be lethal in that it's going to result in a miscarriage, or that embryo just won't develop properly and will never make it to like a live birth situation. So in the way, trisomy 21 is the best trisomy to have because you can actually live with it. So a little bit about Down syndrome, you're probably familiar, but we'll go through it real quick. This is the most common trisomy, not necessarily because it's the most common one to happen, although it might be, but it's the one that you can actually live with. And so it's kind of a survivor's bias in our data, right? It's most common because people can actually have trisomy 21 and live. About 1 in 800 babies born in the U.S. Per year with trisomy 21. And that's not per year, just 1 in 800. Conditions, symptoms, complications include mild to severe mental retardation, increased susceptibility to many diseases, and a higher frequency of other birth defects. And we would label their karyotype as 47, either XY or XX, depending on the sex chromosomes, of course, and then a plus 21. So this is how we label karyotypes that are abnormal. So anytime we're looking at a karyotype, the actual chromosomes that somebody has, we're going to give it a label with their chromosome number, what are their sex chromosomes, and then are there any abnormalities. So for example, this is a Down syndrome karyotype. If you count up all the chromosomes, you'll see that there are actually 47 chromosomes. This individual is XY, so they'd be chromosomally male, right? They have that male Y chromosome. Then we list the plus 21 because, oh, that circle's in the wrong place. Oops. Right here we have an extra 21st chromosome. All right. Now, in addition to the autosomal trisomies we discussed right there, right, where you have an extra autosome like autosome 13, 18, or 21, there are also sex chromosome disorders. So these can happen when you have a non-disjunction event resulting in an extra or missing sex chromosome. So Turner syndrome is an example where a female inherits only one X chromosome. So their karyotype is actually 45X. So instead of 46, the normal number, they have one fewer, and they only have one X chromosome. These women are usually sterile, as their sex organs do not develop at puberty like they should. And there are a variety of other symptoms as well for Turner syndrome. Then there's also Klinefelter syndrome, which is also caused by non-disjunction. This is actually a trisomy of the sex chromosomes where you have an extra X chromosome in males, and so their karyotype is 47XXY. And there are a variety of other ones. There's Jacob syndrome, which is 47XYY. There's triple X syndrome. You can actually have even more than 3 X's. But these are two of the more common ones, one female, one male. Once again, a lot of sex chromosome disorders are going to result in fertility issues where it's difficult for that individual to reproduce. Meiosis gets interfered with having those extra or missing sex chromosomes. So here's an example again of a karyotype, right? An image of all these chromosomes lined up from biggest to smallest. And this one, we have 47XXY. Right down here, we see we have 2 X's and 1 Y. So this person, once again, male because of that male Y chromosome. But they do have an extra chromosome there, and so therefore they have 47. All right, we'll get to chromosomal mutations in the next video.